Battle of Hue, fought in February 1968 during the Tet Offensive, was an absolutely brutal fight. Major Jayson Geroux of the Canadian Army, an expert in urban combat, was on the channel to discuss the battle. In this video, we'll focus on the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, and their fight to retake the Citadel, particularly the difficult fighting at the Dong Ba Tower. Jason's presentation is paired with testimony of the veterans of 1-5 Marines, particularly looking at the attack on the tower.
Here's the 10th to the 12th of February is the planning and movement days. So this is Brigadier General Truong's plan to clear the Citadel. Meanwhile, Bob Thompson's 1st Battalion, 5th Marines is going to start at the main Caw, and it's going to clear down to the southeastern side. He won't have his entire company. He's got to detach Delta company and give it to Colonel Cheatham to help in the mopping up of stragglers down in New Hue. Bob Thompson's 1-5 has a bit of an easier go, but what happens is they get brought in pieces. So Bob Thompson's battalion is down here at Fool Oak, and he's told that he's got to go up to Hue here. Alpha Company leaves first, and it gets all the way to the Citadel, and then Bravo Company leaves in the afternoon, and it gets to the Citadel. The next day, Bob Thompson's helicoptered to the airport, to the airbase at Phu Bai. He receives some general orders about what he's got to do when he gets to the Citadel. He's then transported up to New Hue. He goes to the MacV compound. From there, he's given more specific orders from Colonel Hughes. Okay, you're going to go work for General Truong inside the Citadel and clear the southeast corner. And then he goes up, he takes his Charlie and Delta companies up to Dak Lo Park and the Hue University, and he basically waits there. And meanwhile, Alpha and Bravo companies are already in the main Caw. All right. And then later that evening, Bob Thompson, his battalion headquarters, and Charlie company are able to make it up to the main Caw for the day of fighting on the 13th. And remember, Delta company is still with 2-5, clearing out stragglers by the Phu Cam Canal. So 1-5 leaves the main Caw. It's working its way southeast. And as they're working their way down, they have to do a relief in place with the ARVN airborne troops, yes. Right? And so they're making their way down, and you can see Alpha Company's left forward, Charlie Company's right forward, battalion headquarters, and Bravo Company's in reserve. And as they're making their way down, the ARVN airborne troops are walking past the Americans, and they're having cigarettes and smiling and laughing, right? And this is rather odd. Like, this is the unit that we're supposed to do the relief in place with, and they're leaving their positions already. Like, we haven't got down to where we're supposed to get to yet. So what happened was the ARVN Airborne Regiment was like, oh, the Marines are coming? All right, we're out of here. So they got up and they left, right? So now the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong look and they see the ARVN soldiers withdrawing, and so they move up to their positions. And so when Alpha Company moves up close to the Dong Ba Tower, the world explodes, and suddenly Alpha Company's taking fire from the wall, from the Dong Ba Tower, and from the buildings to their immediate front. And within 15 minutes, they have 35 casualties, including the company commander. Jeez. Right. So Thompson now has to pull Alpha Company out of the front lines, and he has to have Bravo Company go up and conduct a relief in place. And that takes a majority of the morning because of the amount of fire that's coming down. But once that's done by the early afternoon, now you see Bravo Company's left forward. Charlie Company now moves forward, and it runs into the same violence that was perpetuated against Alpha Company earlier that day, where they start taking fire from all sides. And so Bravo Company has to fight its way forward for a couple of hours in order to flank the NVA so that they withdraw back from the front of Charlie Company. And finally, at 14:55, Colonel Hughes tells Bob Thompson to stop the advance. And he asks Thompson for an assessment. Thompson immediately says, I need close air support, I need naval, and I need artillery fire, and I need Delta Company back, because I'm not going to be able to fight this fight without my full battalion. So this is what happens the next day, 14th of February. H hour begins at 0800 hours, but again, with only 2 companies forward and how determined the defenders are, and because the Dong Ba Tower is very well manned, they can't go anywhere. There's 5 challenges. First, it takes authority to get close air support and artillery. Second, he's got to withdraw his troops back, and so that they don't have friendly fire casualties. Third, it takes time for the naval craft to move into place so that they can launch the 5- and 8-inch shells. When they do launch the 5- and 8-inch shells, those shells either slam into the Citadel walls, or they go beyond the NVA's defensive positions and fall past the positions. And when the NVA and the VC see that 1st Battalion is withdrawing back, they go up and move forward so that the rounds land behind them. So those are the 5 challenges that they face. Delta 1-5 is now en route. So Captain Myron Harrington is the Delta 1-5 company commander, and his units are the Doclau Park. They go to board the U.S. Navy watercraft, but it's crammed full of bullets and beans and gasoline, right? Everything you need to fight a battle, right? Like every square inch of that. So Myron Harrington, his company headquarters, and a squad of Marines are able to squeeze themselves onto the boat. So the watercraft start moving their way up across the Perfume and up this waterway. Well, here's the Dongba Tower right there. And as you can see, Brad, that waterway is not too far away from the Dongba Tower. So they start taking fire. The Navy craft start taking fire, but they're able to actually get past and go all the way up to the main caw and drop Myron Harrington off. But now the watercraft have to come back down the river.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, when you start doing the same thing over and over again, the enemy starts. So they start taking fire as they pass by the Dongba. And then they get back to Doclau Park where they can load up the rest of Delta Company. So they load up the rest of Delta Company, who starts making their way up the river. Well, this time the Marines are prepared because they know that they're going to take fire from the tower. Yep. So they got 1st Battalion, 11th Marines. They've got their mortars at Doclau Park. So what they start doing is they start firing all kinds of explosive and tear gas bombs at the Dongba Tower right here. And so all these explosive and tear gas mortar bombs are falling around the Dongba Tower. But what happens, Brad? The prevailing winds that day are blowing to the east.
Yep.
And so what happens is so much CS gas is falling on the Dongba Tower that these invisible clouds of CS gas are now working their way eastwards, just as the U.S. Navy craft are passing the Dongba. And so all of the U.S. Navy sailors and the U.S. Marines on the boats are now coughing and hacking and puking. And it's just because there's this huge volume of CS gas that's now swamping their boats from the rounds that have landed on the Dongba Tower. So the U.S. Navy sailors turn the boats around and they're like, to hell with this. And they drive back to the Doclau Park. So Bob Thompson's still up here without Delta Company. And he gets on the radio with Colonel Hughes and says, I need Delta Company, please. And so that night, the U.S. Navy, they use boats to pull the sampans. They load up, they go up the river. They're actually able to drive by the Dongba Tower and get up to the main caw. And then D Company is actually able to come down and link up with 1-5 down by the Dongba. The problem is now is that it's nighttime. And Myron Harrington cannot do a reconnaissance of the ground that he's going to fight on tomorrow, which is problematic, right? Like ideally, you want to do a reconnaissance of the ground that you're going to fight on. Next day, 15th of February. So here's Thompson's scheme maneuver. He's got Delta Company left forward. They only have 2 platoons because one of the platoons has been pulled off for escort duty. He's got Bravo Company center, and he's got Charlie Company right forward with Alpha Company in reserve. Thompson drops in the close air support and the artillery support, which is great. Bravo 1-5 and Charlie 1-5 start advancing, no challenges. But Delta 1-5 runs into a hornet's nest at the Dongba. More rockets, mortars, an M48 tank, and a pair of M50 Ontos finally arrived in order to overwhelm the enemy positions in and above the wall and the tower. And at 1400 hours, Harrington ordered a squad to climb the wall to see if they could work their way through the structures on top of it in order to close in on the tower. The M48 tank would frequently move out from behind cover, its commander firing the cupola-mounted 50 caliber machine gun at enemy RPG teams, while the gunner fired 90 millimeter ammunition into the wall and tower, all the while being directed by Harrington through a radio. At 1600 hours, Delta 1-5 edged its way closer to the tower, and at 1630 hours, Harrington launched a final assault with 60 millimeter mortar rounds, hammering the tower itself. In a matter of minutes, it was finally captured. And
we're preparing for the night, and I'm thinking about what we need to do, the 7 of us, to survive on top of this tower. We'd already seen a couple of hundred North Vietnamese in front of us. They're going to attack us or probe us. So I have everyone check their resources. Check your pockets. What do you have? Does anybody have water? Well, we had a little water. A couple of guys had, some crackers, and then there was a pack of Salem cigarettes. And I thought, well, we'll save those for dessert. Well, we got the first probe. I think we killed 6 or 8 guys. And there wasn't room for their bodies on the tower, so we just rolled them off the front of the tower. After each probe, I would make sure everyone was all right. I passed out some cigarettes. And we would have to cup our hands, but with this pitch dark, the North Vietnamese would fire at us. And guys were laughing. Rounds are chipping rocks away off the tower. Zing, zing, zing. And Lurch, who wore glasses, said, Sarge, I'm hit between the eyes. I said, oh my God. So I crawled over to him. I was feeling his face. And sure enough, there's a hole right above his nose, between his eyes. And I think, oh my God. And I felt the back of his head to see if the bullet had gone through his head. I started running my finger up across his eye, and there's a rock embedded up above his eyebrow. And I was able to shove that rock down and pull it back out through the hole. And he taped his glasses back together. And he was so happy that he wasn't shot between the eyes. He was just thrilled. So we celebrated by lighting another cigarette. Even guys who didn't smoke would take a drag on a Salem cigarette. And we'd wait for the next probe.
These photos from Dr. Villard. Look at the Dong Ba now. Like, look at it now. Brad is completely pulverized.
Doesn't look like a building anymore.
No. Here's the afternoon. Bravo 1-5 and Charlie 1-5 now have challenges because what's happening is Charlie 1-5 is receiving fire from NVA positioned inside the Imperial Palace. They're on top of the Imperial Palace walls, and they're firing at Charlie 1-5. So the third platoon that had been doing escort duty is brought down, and Bob Thompson throws it over to Charlie Company to see if they support firing positions on the enemy that's firing at Charlie Company. And because Charlie Company can't advance anymore, Bravo Company can't advance any further either because Bravo doesn't want to be flanked. 16th of February, same scheme of maneuver. Delta left forward, Bravo center, Charlie right forward. The NVA demonstrated their ability to act as early morning violent alarm clocks by bombarding the Dong Ba Gate Tower with both 82mm, 60mm mortar ammunition at 4:30 hours. This indirect fire was immediately followed by an attack with a small group of NVA soldiers using grenades and RPGs to cause casualties and evict the squad of Delta 1-5's Marines from the tower itself. Once this was done, the enemy soldiers reoccupied the tower and began firing at Delta 1-5's other positions. Harrington immediately ordered a counterattack to occur, and Marines began by lobbing grenades at the NVA, firing at them from above. This was followed by small arms, rockets, and M79, 40mm grenades, which either caused enemy casualties or forced the Ranger to withdraw, allowing Delta 1-5 to regain the tower by dawn. That's Captain Myron Harrington right there on the left of this photo. That's Captain Myron Harrington there, actually. And that's the Dong Ba Tower.
And that night at our briefing, Major Thompson turned to me and he said, tomorrow Delta Company will take the Dong Ba Tower. He didn't say, try to, will, give it an effort or whatever. He said, tomorrow Delta Company will take the Dong Ba Tower. And I said, aye, sir, we'll do it. As we were mounting the assault, Sergeant Toms joined us and brought about 10 or 12 Marines. That gave us the impetus that we were able to get up on the wall and push through and take the tower.
Bullets were flying right past us. It was heavy fighting. All I could hear people say, I'm hit. And I kept thinking, when is a bullet going to hit me? God was with me. We moved on up. I was using mag after mag. I kept moving up, and getting up on the top. You could see them running around the back. If they'd have gotten any closer, they'd have been hand to hand. It was hell. Everybody was getting killed that damn day. And I kept saying, when is my time? When am I going to get hit? I was 17 years old. God was with me.
I went into the Hue City battle with approximately 120 Marines. When we attacked the tower, we suffered 40% casualties. At the end of the battle, there were 39 of us that were still standing, made it through unscathed.
I love these photos from Dr. Villard. Look at the Dong Ba Tower. It's just completely pulverized now. Like, there's so much munitions have gone into fighting for that piece of real estate. It's just completely destroyed now. The fighting this day is extremely difficult. Battalion only advanced 150 meters that day, but given the almost insurmountable challenges, it was a feat of arms just to make even this kind of progress. The amount of destruction caused by the now daily bombardments, combined with the rat's nests of fighting holes, pillboxes, bunkers, roadblocks, and mutually supporting positions that the NVA had created, along with their sheer determination to hold every position and continual counterattack if a position had been lost, were only a couple of challenges meeting the Americans. Advancing on top of the Citadel's wall in order to flank and fire down on NVA positions could not be done because NVA soldiers in 4 or 5 stories buildings just outside the wall in Jiahui Island, that's that island off to the east, dominated the area with observation of fire. The enemy positioned small arms and machine gun positions on top of the Imperial Palace walls also to look down on 1-5's advance. Buildings were made of thick-walled masonry jammed together with only occasional alleyways or narrow streets, and each room had to be cleared one by one with grenades and savage close quarter and sometimes hand-to-hand combat. Thompson's Marines were rarely relieved slept in 3 to 4 hour snatches, grew numb with fatigue and sometimes despair. To counter all of these challenges, Thompson continued to employ naval and artillery indirect fire and close air support strikes. The dismounted Marines adapted the room clearing tactics ensured to protect the M48 tanks and the M50 Ontos, who in turn protected the infantry by wreaking havoc on NVA positions with large explosive or concrete piercing fused shells. 1st Battalion, 11th Marines supported 1-5's advance by firing 4.2-inch high explosive and tear gas shells from the south bank of the Perfum River also. Like, just, are you kidding me? Like, that's just overwhelming violence. 17th of February, NVA wake-up call, mortar barrage at 0430 hours. Again, Bob Thompson replies with close air support and naval support to begin their advance. But remember, they're sandwiched in between the Imperial Palace and the Citadel's walls, and they're taking fire from both sides, right? So but by the time they finish the day, they're about halfway down the northeastern wall, but they're low on ammunition. Some Marines didn't eat yesterday, and some Marines won't eat today because they've run out of rations. General Tourong, because he wants to help out 1-5, he orders a Black Panther company to go down and support 1-5 and to see if they can get into the Imperial Palace to stop the enemy from firing there. It's a sad day for 1-5. So Major Aloysius Paul McGonigal, he was actually the MacV compound chaplain, but when the battalion padre for 1-5 couldn't join them for the battle, Aloysius McGonigal asked Bob Thompson if he could join them. And there was only one caveat, is that every night, like Bob Thompson says, all right, you can go out and do your thing, go out and help the wounded and do last rites, all the good things the padres do. But every night you've got to come back to my headquarters and report in so I know you're alive and to tell me how your day was. Yeah. And on the evening of the 17th, Major McGonigal doesn't show up. And the next day they found Major McGonigal, he'd been killed. Either a bullet or shrapnel had torn into his head. So it's a sad day for 1-5 because they lose the padre.
Well, the guy was a wild man. He raced around all over the battlefield, encouraging troops, get some, pulling dead and wounded off the streets, giving last rites. He came back every night and spent the night alongside me. And I got to know him pretty well. Chaplain, you got to back off, son. You're going to get killed. And about the 5th day, I guess it was, I don't know exactly, he went missing. So we searched for him and found him in one of the buildings. He was dead.
But he was doing what good chaplains do, right? He was running all over the battlefield, helping the wounded and giving last rites to the nearly dead and all that. So 18th of February is largely a planning and resupply day. Remember, the taking out of the bridges and the close cloud cover has really stymied the logistics, and everything's got to be brought over the water. 1-5 still going to continue working its way southeast. 1-5 still has a lot of resupply challenges and the poor weather and low personnel numbers. There's also restricted fire support because now they're too close to the NVA and the VC positions. And so now Bob Thompson's being told that he may not be able to have the close air support and the artillery and the naval support that he needs because they're very close. The Black Panther commander shows up and he says to Bob Thompson, I want you to use your weapons platforms and systems, and we'll use some explosives, and we're going to blow a wall into the Imperial Palace walls, and I'm going to start clearing out the Imperial Palace. And Bob Thompson looks at him and goes, you're not doing that. That's a suicide mission. Like, you're not doing that at all. No, this is an order from Brigadier General Tourong. So Bob Thompson contacts General Tourong and he says, sir, I get it, but you can't do that. It's a suicide mission. Like, that's just crazy. That's a crazy plan. And so General Tourong rescinds the order. And so the Black Panther company commander is not going to go into the Imperial Palace and start clearing it out yet.
Good for him for being willing to do it, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose. 2 tough days for 1-5. Okay, you can see all the challenges up in the left corner there, right? Because they're so close to the enemy and because they're out in extended line, it's very hard. They can't bring in any close air support or artillery strikes. And, you know, the NVA are still very determined. And staff officers are from Task Force X-Ray are like, tell 1-5 to move faster. Tell 1-5 to move faster. And Bob Thompson, he actually threatens to resign. He's actually like, you can come up here and try fighting this fight because it's, you know, I have all these challenges I'm going through. So I'm trying the best that I can. General Abrams, the guy they named the tank after, he's now up here in I Corps, and he's actually taking command of all of I Corps to try to sort out all of this. And even General Abrams suggests that 1-5 should be relieved in place because it's not doing a good enough job. And Lieutenant General Cushman down at 3 Math in Da Nang, he actually says to Colonel Hughes, I want you to fire Bob Thompson, and you're going to take over command of 1st Battalion and fight it through the rest of the Citadel. And, you know, Brad, in the military, you know, loyalty doesn't only go up the chain of command, it goes down the chain of command too, right? And Colonel Hughes says to Lieutenant General Cushman, I will resign first before I give that order. Bob Thompson is doing the best he can with the resources he has under very challenging conditions. So I will resign first before I give the order to fire Bob Thompson. So General Cushman backs off and Bob Thompson keeps his job and continues on with the fight. The good news is, though, is because Bob Thompson does need more resources, Colonel Bone has told the 3rd Battalion commander from 5th Marines that he has to give up a company to Robert Thompson. So Lima 35 is en route. That's commanded by Captain John Niotis.
Right.
And Thompson, one of his subordinates, comes forward with a daring plan for the evening of the 20th February. And the Alpha Company commander, First Lieutenant Patrick Polk, volunteers a 2nd platoon to conduct this daring plan. They've been fighting during the day, and because urban operations is so physically and mentally exhausting, they fight during the day and then they rest at night. Right? Fight during the day, rest at night. Fight during the day, rest at night. So what the Thompson subordinate says, why don't we try to infiltrate up to the positions, the NVA positions at nighttime, because we've set this pattern now and they're probably expecting us not to do it. So why don't we try to infiltrate at least a platoon up to see if we can get up to those positions? So Thompson's like, let's try it and see what happens. So 2nd platoon from Alpha 15 does its infiltration up, and they're actually able to infiltrate up and occupy the positions that the North Vietnamese Army, the Viet Cong, were in the night before, which is really odd. Like, where did they go?
Right.
All right. And so the 2nd platoon is looking out and they're looking down the street, and there's the NVA soldiers, cigarettes in hand, smoking, talking away, joking. They got their rifles on their shoulders and they're working their way back up to the positions. So what's been happening every day, and remember, when you set a pattern and you're fighting against an enemy that is a living, thinking human being that reacts, when you set a pattern, the enemy is going to adjust to that pattern. Remember how Bob Thompson's been calling in close air support and naval artillery every morning? So what's happened is the NVA have gotten used to that. And so what they do is at nighttime, they wait for the Americans to stop. They look out, okay, the Americans have stopped. Now that the Americans have stopped, they wait till darkened hours, and then they withdraw back. So this way, when the close air support and the naval artillery fire falls down, it falls down in front of them and it doesn't cause any casualties. And then once it stops, they can move back up and reoccupy their positions again. Well, this day, there was no close air support and naval artillery, but the NVA still followed the routine. So they withdrew back. They didn't know that 2nd platoon had infiltrated up. So when these NVA started coming up now, 2nd platoon opens up and kills all those NVA. And now the NVA are like, damn it, they're on to us. Because they know now that we've been withdrawing every night. But the NVA's backs are literally to the wall. They're at the southeastern corner now of the Citadel, and they are very determined to stay in place. But by the end of the day, 1-5 is within 1 block of the southeastern wall, and Lima 3-5 is able to link up that evening. 22 February, between 3:30 and 1200 hours, there's a trading of mortar and rockets between the NVA and the Marine Corps, and there's pretty much a stalemate as a result because there's indirect fire falling all over the place. L35 does a relief in place of Bravo 1-5, and Thompson tells him to attack the Tuong 2 gate. And you know how, you know the saying there, Brad, that professionals are predictable, but amateurs are dangerous?
Yep.
L35 knows nothing about urban warfare tactics. So the commander just says, run forward and start firing. So they literally, with M48 tanks running right behind them, they just literally running forward and completely catches the NVA off guard, because right now the NVA are used to these other tactics. Well, L35, they just run forward and start firing, right? And so they're actually able to gain some ground. Bob Thompson actually almost gets killed by one of the M48 tanks. His battalion headquarters is mistaken for an NVA outpost, and the round sails over, and but they're able to stop the tank from firing, which is good.
Yikes.
And then finally, the Arvin Ranger battalions have cleared Geohoy Island.
Right.
Which now means that they can get up on top of the walls and start clearing those positions up there, which is all right. H hour on the 23rd, 1-5 reaches the southeastern wall. They're going to complete their mission this day. L35 is a little smarter on her operations tactics now, and they use the M48s and the M50s in support, although they do lose 2 tanks, and they're actually able to take the Tuong 2 gate. And Delta 1-5's Myron Harrington, fantastic leadership here. He's using close air support, mortar fire to allow his Marines to sneak up to these fortified defensive positions. At one point, Harrington is about 25 meters away from where the artillery and the close air support is landing.
Oh, wow.
And he's literally leading from the front. And then he's got the tanks firing his dismounted Marines into the objective. And then Myron Harrington is literally leading his Marines in as they attack these defensive strong points. And they're able to destroy these defensive strong points. And so Harrington wins the Navy Cross for his leadership here. But can you imagine being 25 meters away from close air support and artillery?
No, I don't ever want to do that ever.
Wow. No. Oh yeah, like that's incredible. And then Harrington leading the way into the defensive position, literally leading the way in and killing those enemy. Wow. Final days of fighting inside the Citadel. It's largely a South Vietnamese show. So between 26th February and 2nd of March, largely mopping up operations. Bob Thompson sent northeast of the city. And because of his leadership inside the Citadel and northeast of the fighting and during this time period, he's awarded the Navy Cross. And then on the 2nd of March, everybody returns to Phu Bai and Camp Evans and all of their original units.